Now I smell the rain, and with it pain, and it's heading my way. Sometimes I go so tired, but I know I'm not one thing I got to do. Right on, and now it's time to take it down. Sing my song, I'm going round the world and on my way, on my way. In this way, it gives you the day. Right on, got the dream on my dream. Got no time to spend. The time has come to be gone. And though I have redrank 1,000 times, it's time to ramble on.
This will be the 6th video in our physical ergonomics unit. In the last video, in video 5, we started talking about prevention measures to think about, different strategies for preventing work-related musculoskeletal disorders. In this video, we're going to continue that theme. We're going to talk about some other considerations, some other measures that might help prevent WMSDs. In the first prevention video, the last thing we talked about was the posture of seated workers, focusing mostly on office workers. And there's a lot more. You could do an entire unit just on the posture of seated workers, a lot more. I just gave you an overview, some ideas to think about. Another type of work where the worker is seated throughout the workday, this is even more difficult, I think, for the worker because they really can't move around much during the workday. That would be the worker that drives a vehicle or operates equipment in a seated position. A lot of back disorders for these types of workers. And manufacturers have developed ergonomic seating, some other measures to help prevent discomfort for the workers, but still a long ways to go. And I don't know that there's ever going to be the perfect solution. Well, actually, let me go ahead and get started and talk about some of the measures that could be taken possibly to make the workplace more comfortable for drivers and equipment operators and may prevent work-related musculoskeletal disorders for these workers. A little more Led Zeppelin there. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. The seat, the chair, where they're seated in their equipment can make a big difference. We might be able to upgrade their seating. Equipment manufacturers, and when you're talking about heavy equipment, they have really done a lot of work to improve the comfort of the seating for the operators. Trucks also, there have been improvements, but there might even be room for more improvements when it comes to seating for your drivers or equipment operators. And some of you will go to work for companies that have a lot of drivers, a lot of equipment operators. So this might certainly be something that you would need to work on in the future in your career. Designing the equipment so that the controls are within easy reach. A lot of the problems with driving and equipment, especially driving, the way we have vehicles designed with conventional steering wheels, is just the reaching. They're reaching for the wheel. And without major redesign, that's going to be a hard one to overcome, is that reaching position. Now, what we do see with a lot of heavy equipment is a joystick design, which I'll talk more about, that is ergonomically better positioned for the worker. Having vehicles that fit the worker, fitting the worker to the vehicle. Again, that's one definition of ergonomics, is fitting the work to the worker. Fitting the worker to the equipment that they're operating is important also. Again, joystick-controlled vehicles have been developed, not just for heavy equipment, but the joystick-controlled vehicles that have been developed, let's go ahead and bring a picture up here. Here is a conventional passenger vehicle back from the 70s that had joystick control rather than the conventional steering wheel. In this position, and this is the joystick advantage, the joysticks can be positioned so the driver doesn't have to reach out. The controls are in a easy to reach, easy to operate position for the operator. But in normal passenger vehicles, cars, trucks, vans, this hasn't caught on, and I don't know that it's ever going to catch on because we don't like change. Now, when it comes to heavy equipment, this type of control setup is very common. Here is a piece of heavy equipment. We've got the operator's seat here. We've got a joystick on each armrest. The elbows are on the armrest, forearms are on the armrest, the joystick. They can completely control the equipment without being in that awkward reaching position. It allows them to maintain a more ergonomically friendly position while operating the equipment. Now, with heavy equipment and also conventional motor vehicles, you also have foot controls, foot pedals that are involved. That positioning can also play a role. Now, one thing I need to mention, and you're probably already thinking this, as safety managers, we may not have a lot of control over this. We can't completely redesign our equipment, our trucks, our vans, or whatever to be more ergonomically friendly. This is left up to manufacturers. There may be other things that we can do, though. Maybe we can encourage drivers, equipment operators to take breaks periodically. But anytime drivers or equipment operators are taking breaks, productivity suffers. Productivity is diminished. So that's a difficult challenge. Especially truck drivers that are being paid by the mile. They don't want to take a 15-minute break every hour to stretch and flex, because that 15 minutes that they're stretching and flexing, that's dollars out of their pocket. They might have made $20 in that 15-minute period if they had maintained operation of the vehicle. So again, this is really a challenging area. I think when we're talking about workers in these positions, our solution might really go back to work hardening and worker fitness, and also putting them in the best possible chair, the best possible seat for that worker, a seat that maintains a good neutral posture when they're operating that vehicle or that piece of equipment. Like I said before, trucks and equipment have better seats now than they used to have, but there might still be some room for improvement with aftermarket seating. I come from a family of truck drivers. My brother drove a truck right up until he had a truck driving accident that took his life, and he was always investing in a better seat. He was spending, he's only supposed to drive 11 hours a day, but he usually would go beyond that. He was spending 12 to 14 hours at the wheel of his truck, so he was always looking for a better seat that would make driving more comfortable for him. He was also one of these drivers that he wouldn't stop for anything. And part of that was because of the loads that he hauled. He hauled live loads, cattle, hogs, sheep. He had organisms or critters in his trailer that he had to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. If he didn't get them there as quickly as possible, he could lose some product. Animals could die. So he was once he got loaded in that truck, he was balls to the wall, going without stopping for 12, 14, 20 hours at a time in some cases, even though that was illegal to be in the truck that long driving without a break. That's what you see in a lot of truck driving jobs. Another risk factor that we need to be aware of would be repetitive motion, repetitive work activities, repetitive tasks. Here are some ideas for preventing repetitive motion types of injuries. First of all, we want the workstations to be ergonomically designed so that workers can maintain a good posture and work positioning throughout the work task, throughout all of the repetitions. That's going to help prevent injury. Some examples of ergonomic design that can help prevent repetitive motion related injuries would be the height of the workbench or the height of the assembly line, so that workers don't have to bend over. For example, if the work table is at the right height, they don't have to bend over, then they can perform their repetitive tasks without the stress on their body of bending. Mandatory work breaks. Again, this is at the administrative level, at the managerial level, requiring workers to take breaks periodically, just like for the office workers. Every 15 to 20 minutes, they take a break and they stretch. Also, when we're talking about stretching, depending on the task, there may be some specific stretches for different parts of the body that might need to be implemented. And these stretches would be performed before the workday begins and during the mandatory breaks. Different assist devices that reduce the wear and tear caused by the repetitive motion. An example would be a roller table. Roller tables that on the assembly line make it easier to move product down the line. And of course, you got automated assembly lines as well, conveyor type assembly lines that may be an assist to the workers. Work job rotation, which we've talked about before, is another method to consider. It may not always be practical. It may not always be liked by upper management, but a work or job rotation schedule to limit the amount of continuous repetition could be helpful as well. And here's another note on the importance of good work positioning to eliminate bending, overreaching, keep the work in front of the worker at a comfortable height. There may also be personal protective equipment, which we'll talk more about, that can help prevent the development of repetitive motion-related injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome. But back to work or job rotation. Again, it can be a good strategy for limiting worker exposure, not just for repetitive motion, but a lot of different industrial hygiene types of hazards. What we're doing with work or job rotation is we're sharing the exposure among multiple workers. And here is an example here. Got red lines all over my slide now. Here's an example of what we're talking about. Let's say we have two healthy workers who are assigned to the task of reorganizing a masonry material storage area. The job that they're working on requires manually stacking loose concrete blocks, brick, and sacks of mortar onto pallets. A forklift is then used to move the pallets. The task will take at least one full 8-hour shift to complete. Both workers are certified forklift operators. So how can the work be organized to reduce exposure to these workers? perhaps workers could alternate between stacking pallets and running the forklift. You have one worker stacking the pallet while the other is moving the material using the forklifts, and they rotate. They change roles every 30 minutes, every hour, every 20 minutes, whatever works out for the operation. But that kind of rotation will help to minimize the exposure that is experienced by the workers. Sharing the load, sharing the task. And there are so many different other examples that may be applicable to different work settings. But never forget job rotation or work rotation as a method for limiting exposure. There are also a wide variety of ergonomically designed tools. They're designed to be more ergonomically friendly to prevent injury. An example here, if we have a traditional hand shovel like you might use in gardening that you might see in a commercial nursery operation, the conventional hand spade requires workers to maintain a bent wrist position. Notice the bending of the wrist with this conventional type of handle. With the ergonomically designed handle with a pistol grip, it allows the worker to maintain a neutral wrist position. Again, may not seem like a big deal, but if a worker is using a tool like this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, the wear and tear of this bent wrist position will eventually catch up with the worker and could result in Guyon tunnel syndrome, carpal tunnel syndrome, or other disorders related to the wrist, the hand, and the arm. So just straightening out that angle, eliminating that angle with a pistol grip can be an important improvement for the workers and can prevent disorder down the road. Here's an ergonomically designed hammer, which I had one of these. I never could get used to it. And that's a problem that we see with some of these ergonomically designed tools. They're slow to catch on. Again, workers don't like change. And it's workers sometimes won't give it time to they won't give it enough time to get used to using the new design. That could even happen with the little hand spade that we have here. Then we have shovels with different handle configurations that are designed to be more ergonomically friendly. This handle design, again, it allows the worker to maintain a neutral wrist position when moving material using different types of shovel. Now, one ergonomically designed tool that I do really like, and I need to get a new handle for mine, is a trenching shovel. And what makes the trenching shovel more ergonomically friendly is that angle between the handle and the blade of the shovel. The way it's angled makes it a lot easier to do trenching work than, let's say you're using a traditional trenching tool, a sharpshooter, for example. Sharpshooters are commonly used in trenching work. The sharpshooter's it's harder to get the material out of the trench. You can break loose the material, and you can remove the material with a sharpshooter, but the angle of the tool makes it more difficult. This is designed for cleaning out the bottom of your trench. So again, very, very useful ergonomically designed tool that's more worker friendly. And these are just a few examples. When you're working as a safety manager, when you do your ergonomic assessment, when you identify potential problems, you'll want to do your homework, do more research, see what's available on the market. There may be a tool solution that will make it easier for the worker, and when we make it easier for the worker, in many cases that's going to help prevent injury. Other examples of ergonomically designed tools that I don't have on here would be different vibrating tools that have padded handles or different handle configurations. That would also be an important consideration. If you have workers using demo hammers or large drills or jackhammers, having the vibration resistant materials or the vibration dampening materials in those handles can help prevent injury. But if it's a heavy tool like a jackhammer, work rotation may come into play too for preventing injuries. There are different forms of personal protective equipment that can help prevent work-related musculoskeletal disorders. There are a variety of braces. Here is a brace, a wrist brace that is designed to keep the wrist in the proper neutral position. This can help prevent carpal tunnel syndrome or other wrist-related disorders. Lifting belts like we have here, and I'll say more about that here in just a second. Not a big fan of lifting belts. Grip assist hooks or other devices like we saw in the previous video can help workers get a better grip on materials that they're handling manually. Vibration protective gloves like we have here, built-in cushioning, padding to protect workers from vibration. What I call gripper gloves. These gripper gloves, they're constructed out of a tacky, sticky material that requires workers to exert less force to hang on to the loads that they're handling manually. Love these. I do a lot of rock work around the house as a hobby. These are really good for handling rock, native stone, when I'm building a wall or whatever it is, because you don't have to exert as much force because the tacky grippiness of the glove helps you to maintain your grip on the rock or whatever else it is that you may be moving. Footwear also, and I've got the next slide, we'll talk more about footwear as a protective device. A lot of these are really preventative measures as much as they are protective measures. Back to lifting belts. You'll see a lot of companies that will require their workers to wear lifting belts. But are these back support belts effective? There is a study from the CDC, a brochure from the CDC. Again, I'm not going to open the link. If you would like this link, let me know and I'd be happy to share it with you. But the overall findings from studies looking at the effectiveness of back support belts has found that they don't really provide that much benefit to the workers. In fact, there are some potential problems when you put workers in lifting belts. Again, if we were in class, we would talk about this. I'd ask you what you think might be some problems. Here are some possible problems. When workers are wearing lifting belts, their core musculature, that is like a corset that protects them, that core musculature in the abdominal regions and the lower back is not strengthened. If we allow workers to acclimate, to harden for the work they're doing, that core musculature will be strengthened and they can perform the work without the use of a back belt. Also, the lifting belts give workers a false sense of security. Worker puts on a back support belt, they think, oh, I can lift this. It's only 150 pounds. I've got my belt, though, that's going to protect me. Well, that's BS. That belt is not going to protect you when you are trying to lift something that's too heavy. We're not power lifters. This is not a powerlifting competition. Again, I would much rather see a company have lifting limits, and I've said this before, lifting limits instead of giving workers back support belts or lifting belts. That's going to do more for protecting workers than the belts. The belts may actually become problematic and exacerbate problems with back injuries or other lifting related injuries. All right, last slide. I want to talk about footwear. There is a lot of different orthopedic footwear products available. There's orthopedic footwear that can help workers prevent plantar fasciitis, provide arch support, help with workers who are over supinating or over pronating, workers who are diabetic. There's special footwear to help maintain the circulation and blood flow through the extremities of the workers. That's one of the symptoms of diabetes, is reduced blood flow in the extremities, and the diabetic footwear helps maintain proper blood flow. You may have not realized this, or maybe you have, but in severe cases of advanced diabetes, oftentimes feet and legs have to be amputated because of the loss of circulation. It can be really severe, life-threateningly severe in advanced diabetes. But the footwear, the diabetic needs to be taking care of themselves in other ways, but the diabetic footwear can help. There are shoes that help with flat feet. There are orthopedic footwear available in all styles, including orthopedic boots. So that's one thing your company might consider, is requiring workers to wear specific footwear that protects. And it's not just protecting their feet. The wrong footwear could lead to all sorts of disorders, including back disorders. Back, hip, knee, ankle disorders can all be affected by the footwear that the person is using. Now, one thing we run into from a safety management standpoint is that footwear, let me back up. OSHA does not require employers to provide footwear to their workers, except in certain exceptions. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, companies are not required to provide protective footwear to their workers. Even steel-toed boots, companies aren't required to provide steel-toed boots. Some companies do. Some companies provide other types of protective footwear also. But there are a couple of exceptions, but for the most part, workers have to provide their own footwear. So that's going to prevent some workers from getting the footwear they need. If they need orthopedic footwear, they may not spend the money on it themselves, unless it's prescribed by a physician, and then different forms of insurance may come into play to help cover those costs. But orthopedic footwear, I've already talked about this, but can help with a large variety of different problems like pronation and supination problems. I am a fan of, and some companies require this, over-the-ankle lace-up boots. Properly fitted over-the-ankle lace-up boots can provide ankle support that can mitigate the wear and tear on the ankles, and that can also help prevent other footwear-related disorders. Like I said, some companies require over-the-ankle. They've got to be lace-up. The lace-up are important because you can lace them up tightly. That provides even more support for the ankle. One organization, generally speaking, that has very strict requirements on the footwear worn by employees would be railroads. Anytime we were on a railroad job, we were required to make sure that all of our employees had over-the-ankle lace-up boots with what we call a defined heel. We couldn't have a smooth sole. There had to be a separate heel. If the workers did not have those type of boots, they could not be on the railroad construction projects. Other companies have similar policies as well. That's just one example. Even if it's not orthopedic footwear, train your employees about the importance of proper fit. For some work tasks, custom fitting may even be beneficial for the workers. In addition to orthopedic footwear like we have here, there may be orthotic devices that could be inserted in standard footwear that could help. Different types of lifts. Maybe an employee has one leg that's a little longer than the other, so they put the orthotic device, the orthotic lift, in one boot that helps to balance out the wear and tear on the body. Having one leg that's a little shorter or a little longer can cause back problems and other problems. I think I mentioned that before. So an orthotic that helps correct that can prevent disorders. Cushioned insoles. Different types of corrective insoles. You can get footwear that corrects pronation, supination. You can also get insoles to put in normal shoes that will help correct problems with overpronation or oversupination. And there are other inserts, other orthotics also that may help prevent work-related musculoskeletal disorders. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. Our contact with the world around us is through our feet. The force of walking, the force of working, it starts with our feet and works up through the body. If there's any imbalance or any problem, if we're an oversupinator, overpronator, that gets multiplied. That multiplies forces, the forces acting on our body and our different connective tissues, musculature, skeleton, and so on. So can't emphasize this enough. And it gets overlooked. Again, your company where you work, you may not be able to provide, you may not be able to pay for your workers' footwear, but you can certainly train them on the importance of having good footwear, the right footwear for the type of job they're doing. All right, and that brings us to the end of this unit. Just a quick summary. Musculoskeletal disorders are the most common, most expensive type of injury. We need to have it high on our priority list. Companies should have it high on its priority list, even though it's not OSHA regulated. And I'll let you do the translation. OSHA is not the most important thing when it comes to safety. We got to go above and beyond. It's ridiculous that OSHA doesn't have ergonomic standards, but they don't. So we can't just go by what OSHA is telling us to do. That would be we can't do it. So it's not about OSHA. Safety's never about OSHA. It's part of what we do. We have to comply. But at the end of the day, safety is not about the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.